that I like using whatever I have. One of the things that my kids in this kind of transition in the way we've been eating at home, they absolutely love beets now. So I like to use beets because they're this superfood. They're amazing for you. And they're a little intimidating if you don't know how to treat them. But once you do these couple simple steps, they're so incredibly delicious. So I like to just poke a couple holes in them and wrap it in foil. These are pretty small beets, so it won't take them as long as opposed to like this one, which might take around 45 minutes. These aren't going to take as long. And just add a little bit of sunflower oil, and I'm going to wrap these up loosely and put them in the oven. So while we're doing the rest of these beets will be getting ready for us. But I think that they're very underutilized and they're not expensive. And if you roast them and then the way we'll treat them, they kind of end up tasting like this delicious earthy candy, like a gummy bear or something. But like I said, it was something that we just started eating, and now my kids are like, hey, what about we have to grab some beets? So it's just developing that flavor, and that like the more you eat it, the more you want to eat it is what I see. So I just drained my rice and I'm going to add it to my water here. Give it a little bit of a stir. And I'll show you what this looks like in a couple minutes so you can see. But I am going to leave it covered just to speed up the process a little bit. And we can go ahead and start getting some of these other ingredients ready. I am going to roast these, and so I have a pan and also a bowl. I can put them together in the bowl, and I'm just going to toss them with a little bit of the sunflower oil. But one thing to remember when you are working with different vegetables is their cook time might vary, and you definitely can cook them together, but adjust the size of the piece that you're cooking so that they, you know, so the zucchini, which is a lot softer than a sweet potato, is going to take less time. So I might cut the zucchini slightly bigger, and it has a little bit more water in it, so it's going to shrink a little bit. Than I would the sweet potato. I might cut the sweet potato a little bit smaller. But when you're thinking of composing your dish or having everything together, you definitely want each component that you put in there to have the same kind of bite so that everybody can get a little bit of something, or, you know, have this well-rounded bite and not just all sweet potato or beet or just wild rice. So one of the other good things about this is the more color you add, you know, you just naturally add more vitamins and more flavor, and you can change up the texture by adding different components. It's just it's one of our favorite dishes. You can have it warm or cold. So if you wanted to make this the day before a picnic or something, you could do that and chill it and let the dressing really get absorbed by the wild rice and flavor it, and then chill it and bring it the next day, and it's just as good. I kind of like eating it warm, especially on a day like today. It's a little bit cold and windy and rainy, so it's nice having that dressing that we'll be making warm and just kind of oozing all over everything with the hot roasted vegetables. So we'll cut up the sweet potato. And I like this too because each one of these gives such a different taste and texture. You know, when the sweet potatoes are all done, they're going to be like a creamy, sweeter bite as opposed to the beets that are going to be a little bit more chewy and juicy and earthy. But I'm just going to cut these into small little cubes. not terribly small, but that's kind of a 1/4-inch dice there. And put them in my bowl. So I love the sweet potato, and I think that it's not appreciated as much if you're not in, early fall or later fall. People don't use it, but they're still absolutely great around this time of year. And you can get them in all these different colors. And with the different colors, I mean, you can have a purple sweet potato that is just as delicious. They're a little bit earthier than the orange sweet potato, but they're so beautiful. And, you say it, and I'm sure everybody's felt it at some point, but you eat with your eyes, right? And the more color and the more inviting and vibrant it looks, the more you're going to want to eat it. So I like trying to find as many colorful things as I can and add them to this salad. One more piece of this. So we have our sweet potato, and I absolutely love squash. So I'm going to add a little bit of this squash also. Normally I would pull the seeds out and save them, but although this is organic, I don't know who specifically grew it or anything, so I don't want to save the seeds on that. But it is a good way to, when I get stuff like, I have this incredible pumpkin that it was grown for me, it was gifted to me from the Three Sisters Rematriation garden, and it's incredible. Like this one, when I'm ready to use it, I definitely will harvest the seeds and dry them and make sure that I keep them, because I know that was gifted for the purpose of getting some of those seeds back into our community. But it's amazing. I have always been a little bit of a gardener, but never really considered myself like a really strong grower. And this journey on learning how to just be a little bit more self-sufficient when it comes to our food systems and growing over the past few years has really made dreams that I wanted to have, like these beautiful community gardens, come true, and being able to have a little bit more people in our community that feel the same way about it. It's been really incredible. And I know that there's different resources in our different areas on how we can access some of those foods that are being grown by, say, Dream of Wild Health, I know has this incredible Indian food share. And here in Ho-Chunk land in central Wisconsin, we have, CSAs where we can help get some of our ingredients. And it was as simple for me as reaching out to the people who are running the CSA and saying, if I can bring you some seed, would you be willing to grow that for the community? And they agreed. So we'll be having some of our ancestral ingredients going out in those boxes, which for us is, hasn't been done before. And I'm really excited to be able to provide some of that for the community. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't kind of say a couple of years ago that this is incredibly important to me. And not only is it the flavor or the texture that is different in something that's homegrown, but being able to show what you grew and share that is incredibly rewarding for me. And I'll tell you, in my year one of growing my own garden last year, which was really our, we got our community garden up for Wild Bearies last year, and there were so many invasive species, and the root beds from these Siberian elm overtook everything. It was like, when I looked at it, I knew that it was going to be a lot of work. Like, growing your own food isn't enough work. Getting the soil back to a state where it was healthy and getting our plants to thrive there so that they could produce was it's going to be like years before we are able to look at that garden and be like, wow, this is amazing. But it's something that we can work towards. And the more that we show it's important, the more our community has really stepped up to say that this is something they want to do more of. And the most rewarding part about it is seeing, you know, my nieces and nephews and the next generation come out to say, I want to weed, or I want to help you get rocks out of there. We were all really dirty, and my niece was there and she had a little cowboy hat she got from like the St. Vincent's, and she had a wagon that I bought, and it was so neat to see her just like dragging that wagon around and picking up rocks, because for her, she was, you know, it was this amazing gesture of contribution. And she was like, I work at the garden. And it was just so amazing that we started a program to help include more of our youth in the Garden Warriors and the Garden Bearies down here. So I think it's a good way to kind of lead by example. I was excited about it and they saw me excited about it. And they're like, we want to be part of this. And it ended up being this, I mean, we got only 2 rows of corn, and out of those 2 rows of corn, maybe 5 to 10 viable ears that we could use for seed, but it produced, and it was amazing to see food grow in a spot that had been covered with so many invasive shrubs that they were taller than me when we first had to plow it down. So it was this land that was in our community, but that everybody just drove past and didn't think twice about. And now it's turning into this beautiful space where we can grow food at. And so those ideas can really, really end up paying off if you invest in them. And for me, it's been beautiful just to be able to be a part of all of the work that's being done and to see people as excited as I am about food, right? So I am going to cut this summer squash here, just slightly bigger. This came in my food box yesterday and I thought, oh my gosh, what a great surprise. And it isn't even about the knife cuts or making sure that everything's perfect. I always like the beauty of the organic shapes that you get, because you know that you're using every part of that vegetable when you see kind of a shape that might not be the same as a perfect diced shape or something. So I'm going to do this with the summer squash and then the same thing with the zucchini. Are there any questions? I'm not able to see the chat so well, but if there's any questions along the way.
I can read those out to you if you want me just to kind of blur them out as they come, but we're good right now.
Okay, perfect.
I see there's a hand raised or wave. Was that somebody who had a question?
Oh yeah, let's see. Where it's Jonah Hill.
Yes.
Joanna? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, how much wild rice is she cooking for this dish?
So for this dish, I did around a cup of the dry wild rice. So I didn't use a lot. A little goes a long way, especially when you're adding all these extra flavors and textures to it. Because you can see right now, this bowl is looking pretty decent filled. I have a couple of these purple potatoes I got. They're so tiny, but you can see how incredibly beautiful they are inside. And so I have this, and it's this incredible tool. It's like a washable sponge, and I have this one designated just for my vegetables so I can use as much of the skins as possible. And I just like to give it a really nice, good wash, you know, under the water like that. And then it gets away all the dirt or anything that might be imperfect. And if there's a significant spot that I have to cut away, I can cut that away. But I end up being able to keep the majority of the skin on there, which you would like to do if you can. There's a lot of nutrients right there that sometimes get cut away if you don't include that. So if I can leave like this piece right here, I'll just cut the end of that off. That looks like it might have a little eye there, and still use the rest of this. But these purple potatoes are super delicious. And it just gives this other, like I said, level of color and texture. And they actually have a lot more flavor in them than a red or a russet potato. So I like to use them too. So this, I'm just going to quickly drizzle with, it's about a tablespoon of oil. You don't need very much, but you don't want it to get, you know, a real thick skin, and you want to kind of be able to distribute your seasonings. And that oil helps them stick a little bit to the vegetables. And let's see. So I like to use smoked salt. I get mine from Spring at Sakari Farms, and this has pinyon pine in it. But you just need a tiny little bit because that smoked flavor really carries the salt a lot farther. And once I started using smoked salt, I use significantly less salt in all of my dishes because you don't need very much. And what you really want to do here is highlight the flavors that are already there. You don't want to add too much on top of them. You want them to be what you're appreciating in this bite. And if you can see already, that looks incredible. Like, I'm going to just lay this on a sheet pan and get it nice and spread out and put that in my oven at 350. And I'm going to check my rice really quick here because it's almost done. See if I can take this over here. You can kind of see that it's starting to open up. And at this point, I'm just going to shut it off and keep it covered for a couple minutes to let those last ones pop open. I like my rice like that. There's a huge debate on how much you should be cooking your wild rice. And there's some people that say that maybe I overcook it a little bit, but I don't think so. Like, we like our rice, once you rinse it, it kind of gets, it kind of like closes up a little bit with this rice. So it goes from being slightly open to slightly closed again. So I like to cook it till it's open. And I guess it's just your preference, but I think with any other rice, you want to at least get it to a point where you can digest it, right? So I like to do that, get it to that point. I also have a little bit of a recipe here to make your own salad dressing. So what I have here is just a jar, but you can, like a jar that I sterilized, I think it was an olive jar. You can use anything that has a cover, or you most definitely can use a blender, but I wanted to show you that you didn't need to do that if you wanted to make your own dressing. And every time you're controlling what goes into something, it's better than if you buy it pre-purchased at the store. Like, we definitely, in my refrigerator, have some pre-made salad dressings, but if I have a chance to make my own oil and vinegar dressing, then I always do. And it isn't really that hard. So I have some dried cranberries here. I'm just going to give them a little bit of a chop to get some of that flavor awake. I like to buy the dried cranberries here in Wisconsin from the local growers instead of, say, a craisin, because there's a lot of added sugar in a craisin, and they add a lot, again, to preserve it. That if you can control that and get it straight from the source, or do your own, then you know what you're putting in there, right? You know that you don't have all those extra preservatives, or it's not, you know, soaked in sugar and then given a sugar bath and then dried. You can kind of control that a little bit more. But if you have to get craisins, just be aware that there is extra added to that, and you might not need as many, or you might not want to add, you know, sugar to it, just to control that. So I'm going to put those in my jar. with a little bit of vinegar. I have maple vinegar that I like to use, but you could use apple cider vinegar or rice wine vinegar or anything, as long as you're adding a little bit of that acid. And I'm going to, it's around 1/4 cup in this jar. I just want to cover my cranberries and let them get a little bit of a drink and soak that in. The cranberries themselves are going to add a little bit of that acid that you want. I know people talk about it, right? Like salt, sugar, acid, and these different places on your tongue that you can taste flavors. But really adding an acid to something like this that is a little bit more rich or a little bit more sweet is the complete opposite of that flavor, right? Or of that sensation. So it complements it perfectly. Whether that's some fresh lemon juice on top or a vinaigrette where you might be adding the vinegar or lemon juice to this and then tossing it, it cuts through the richness of the rest of the dish, and it's really refreshing to add. So I have my chopped up dried cranberries and some vinegar in here. I am going to add just a tiny little bit of honey because my kids love honey. And honey has this incredible characteristic where it helps emulsify a dressing, which means that when you shake it and you kind of get it blended, the honey is going to help it stay blended. You don't have to add it, but if you do, it'll suspend your mixture of your salad dressing mixture a little bit longer, and it won't separate immediately. So I add just a tiny little bit. That's probably, if it's a teaspoon, it's not very much. And a little bit of my sunflower oil and just a tiny pinch of the smoked salt. And I'm just going to go ahead and put the jar on that and then shake it. If you wanted to freshen this up a little bit, you could add some orange juice to it, like a fresh orange juice, fresh squeezed orange. But I think I'm going to leave this one the way it is, and you can see that it's got this beautifully mixed. I'll give it one more shake before I put it on the salad, but it's that easy, having some vinegar, some oil, and whatever flavors you want to add to it. Sometimes, like I might add some dried shallot to that, or some fresh chives or something, depending on what else I'm adding to my salad. And for me, on this food journey also, it's been pretty neat being able to see my kids not be intimidated by certain flavors anymore. Whereas 5 years ago, we would not have been okay with putting raw red onion on anything. And now it offers this wonderful texture, and they're a little bit sweeter. You can get onions that aren't as strong if you're a person that doesn't really like onion. And it like there's these beautiful sweet onions you can get that are like Spanish. I found to start introducing it as raw in my family, if I cut it thin, they were okay with it. Crazy, right? Like if I cut it as thin as I could and added it in, then it wasn't this overwhelming, strong, powerful bite. It was just a little bit extra flavor and freshness to the dish. So I like cutting just a little bit of red onion really thin. We also like adding some nuts, but I know there's quite a few people that have nut allergies or sensitivities. So a good alternative is seeds. We have pepitas in our house or sunflower seeds. And when we're lucky, we get piñons from the Southwest. And those are incredible to add texture. You really want to have that like I mentioned before, that full bite where you have something soft, something sweet, something savory, a little bit of acid, and just the slightest bit of, you know, the saltiness to bring it all together. And you end up getting these incredible spoonfuls or forkfuls of one bite that wraps it all up together. And they also became okay here at the house with these little onions if I cut them on an angle, and they kind of also get lost a little bit, but not lost. I guess they're not lost. They don't overpower the way if you had like a larger bite of an onion or even the green onion, just adding a little bit of that in. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my rice, show you what it looks like here. So you can see just leaving it covered, and now it's just this incredible, beautiful. Some of them have kind of curled up, and some of them are just barely getting open. I'm going to drain it and then run a little bit of cool water over it. Just to give it a good rinse and to make sure if there are any of those little grassy tag-alongs that I'm rinsing them out. It's not going to hurt you if they're in there, but it's giving it a nice good rinse gets rid of all of that. Anything extra that might have been there from the processing. And I am just going to start as these components are getting together, adding them into this beautiful bowl here. So yeah, this is 1 cup of cooked wild or of dry wild rice, and it's enough for us. It's probably going to be, you know, just our lunch, but it would be a hearty side dish if you had it, if you were bringing a side dish along to something, or, you know, wanted to add it to your main meal. For us, when you add together all of these other components, it's hard to have it be just a side dish because it's so incredibly delicious together. One of the things that I found also is adding the salad dressing to the rice gives it a chance to kind of soak it all up. And then you can add a little bit extra at the end just to top it off. But I like to dress my rice more than I like to dress the rest of the salad. I think that anything beyond this is just going to enhance it, but I don't want to use too much because, like I said, I don't want to drown out these flavors. They're so incredible. And definitely along the way, you know, do a little taste. Got to make sure it tastes all right, right? That's amazing. And I saved just a little bit of this dressing to put on the top at the end. So I'm going to set this aside and pull my beets out. Take a look at them. And as you can see, they've kind of opened up a little bit. I'm going to see. I didn't peel it before I roasted it because once you have it roasted, the skin kind of just wipes off. And it's a lot easier and less messy to handle once it's roasted. These are still just a little bit hard, but you can see that the skin is coming off easy. And that's all you have to do is wipe it and it comes off that way. I am going to take the skin off of these and kind of cube them up just so that you can see how beautiful they are when they're finished. And for us, what we like to do with beets is let them get to that really naturally sweet state where they kind of turn into this natural, like earthy sugar cube. Interesting, I have a grower that I worked with at the UW Madison who actually got her PhD in beets, and getting to work with her in the seed to kitchen work that I do with the UW, I was able to learn so many incredible things about beets that, you know, you just take them for granted, and everybody knows this variety, just this red beet, but there's actually a chemical that they try and develop in the beet that gives it that earthy flavor. So I remember one time talking to her and saying, like, she said, "How is it?" You know, and was like, "How is it?" And I didn't want to be rude or mean and say, "I could taste like dirt," but I did. We were like, it's very dirty tasting. And she was so excited because that was what they had wanted that beet to be. Some people absolutely love the geosmin flavor that it gives, which is the earthy kind of dirt flavor that beets have. These are almost done, but I just diced it so that it would be finished in time, and put it back into the little bit of sunflower oil. And I'm just going to leave that open and let it finish roasting for another couple minutes with the rest of the vegetables. Actually, while I'm here, I'm going to give those a quick little turn. But you can see they're looking incredible. And the colors, the way it smells too, it's making me hungry.
Someone asked if you dry your own cranberries.
I do. Here where I'm at. Sorry, I had to do another taste on that potato and make sure it was getting cooked enough. Where I'm at here in Wisconsin, I'm just down the road from the Cranberry Fest in Warrens. So I have a couple small time farmers that I work with, and they sell me around 50-pound cases. And I have these beautiful solar dryers. And so I'm a processor. I know I'm a trained chef, and I enjoy being in the kitchen, but I even more so enjoy processing everything. So I'm a butcher. I dry my own corn. We go out and we harvest, and I love drying that and preserving food. Like that's what I do in my fun time, right? We go and harvest things and dry it. So I have drying screens. I have a solar dehydrator. I have dehydrators that I can plug in that are electric if the weather is not cooperating on a certain day. And like I said, being able to control the flavor that you put into that, there's so many more opportunities and options when you do it yourself on how you want to add infused flavor, say. So I know if you go to the store, you can usually find cherry flavored dried cranberries or blueberry flavored. But again, that's like introducing syrups and extra sugars in, where if you had some of that juice and marinated your cranberries in that and then dehydrated them in the sun, it's going to be so much more incredible when it comes to flavor. There might be some hits and misses. I mean, there's still some things that I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? It didn't turn out at all. And all the way I had wanted it to, right? But finding the way that it's the scientific part of cooking, right? And preserving things and finding the way that works best. Sometimes we can our cranberries even, and then have them, you know, in a blender and blend up those canned cranberries, and it turns out completely different than drying them. So it's just about thinking of what you want your end product to be, and then being able to say, I am going to do this to get there, and I'll see if it works. And most of the time, just doing a little bit of research will get you to that point. Like I said, there's times when I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to be fantastic, and it doesn't work. But then I learned maybe I need to adjust this, or maybe I need to add this step to it. And a good example, drying corn. You know, I spend a whole month at least, if I'm lucky, 6 weeks in harvest time being around all these different varieties of corn. And for hoe chunks, we parboil our corn and then dry it. And, you know, parboil it, take it off the cob, and then dry it. And some tribes dry it on the cob, or some tribes dry it partially on the cob and then take it off, or however you want to process it in the end result. 2 years ago, I was able to have 5 different varieties, and I processed them slightly differently each time. And the end result was so incredibly different just by changing the amount of time that I parboiled it, or when I turned it into hominy and then dried it, or if I turned it into hominy and then ground it and then dried it. It was so incredible just being able to say, like, I think I'm going to do it this way, and seeing if it would work. I mean, one of them completely didn't work and I felt bad, but I did it in small batches. And out of the 10 things that I had wanted to try, having one where I was like, oh my gosh, that was a total wash. I messed that one up. Wasn't too bad because it was only a couple cobs of corn that I didn't treat right. And I came out with these 9 other products from just being able to take a couple days in my kitchen and say, I think I can do this. And whether or not I can execute it right, you know, but I had wanted to see all the different beautiful ways that corn would show up. And if I treated it these different ways, how it would show up for the end dish. And it was pretty incredible to just be able to spend that time with the corn and see how incredibly different it did show up. So were there any other questions before? I just want to wait a couple more minutes on those vegetables, and then we can combine the dish, and if there's any other conversation. Otherwise, I can still talk. But for me, so there has been a lot of conversation lately, and especially in our community and beyond, about what food is medicine, that term, and what it means to people. And I was thinking about it this morning, especially because of this presentation. And I kind of shared a little bit about my history, and even just growing up, like, you know, my mother was a diabetic, my grandmother was a diabetic. You know, it's something that, like I said, it wasn't a matter of if, it was how long could I wait until that was going to be my reality in my life, and what could I do? But for me, food is medicine means so much more than that, right? Food is medicine. It's different for me than I would hope it would be for you. That for me, the process of cooking, of going out and foraging, or being in the garden, is healing. And putting it together for me is healing. And sharing a meal with somebody is healing. You know, I don't think that that can be duplicated. And I think that each one of us needs to find where that's at in our food systems for ourselves. You know, we all can relate to some level of our food system, whether it is hunting or butchering or cultivating or drying the corn or supporting maple syrup, which is going on right now. It's an incredible time, right? When the woods kind of wake up and give us this beautiful, sweet gift. But one thing is, we are all consumers and we all eat, right? So if that is the act that's healing for us, then the more we incorporate that connection to our ancestors, to those that were here before us, and appreciate the flavors that the Creator gave us, like the wild rice or the bison or the elk, or however it is in whatever area that you're from, or whatever connection brings you home when you have that. That's what the medicine is, right? That's the healing part of it. And we've had a lot of talks amongst some of my peers and other chefs about what comfort foods are. Because when you hear the words comfort food, I personally think of meatloaf and mashed potatoes and gravy or something, you know, like this home style cooking. But when I really think of comfort food, I think of these meals that I had with my grandma, like on a picnic blanket in a field while we were out sharing another experience. You know, it wasn't the food that was comforting. It was the people that I shared it with, or the things we were doing around that meal, because it wasn't about the meal, it was about everything else. And so I always like to say, for when people talk about food as medicine, it's really the individual's choice on how that food is going to heal them and what connections that food will bring to them. And I can only speak for myself in saying that being around our ancestral ingredients or our community and participating in, say, a small garden, or, you know, sharing, pulling a wagon around that little garden, removing rocks. That's what the medicine is. It's the act that brings us to this, you know, meal that might be shared with others that you care for, and the feelings that you have there. I always like to say, you know, I can close my eyes and think of one of my favorite meals ever, and food can transport me back to that moment, you know, from the way it smells to the way it tastes to the people I shared that meal with. And every chance that I get to cook, you have the ability of creating those memories and those connections and bringing forth those emotions that are connected with that. So like I said, when I cook with Jack's Rice, I think of my friend Jack and his family and the amazing times and laughs they must have when they're gathering that rice. And you can't really put a value on it, but I know that when we eat this meal, I'll have him in my prayers and his family in my prayers. And hopefully the things that they're doing that are beautiful for their community will continue on when all of us share this meal with Jack, right? And every time I talk about that rice, I think everybody that has access to it is sharing that meal with him too. And for me, that's the medicine part in the food is medicine. So just sharing a little bit on how I like to think of it and what it's done for me, because it has changed my life, you know, being on this journey and being able to access and share in the ways that we have been able to. It's hard right now, right? Food security is an issue. And I feel it. I know going to the grocery store as a single mom, I can spend a lot more than I should be spending just to try and eat right. So taking control of that and really using what we have available to us and having these ancestral ingredients like this pumpkin show up to be in our lives, it's hard to deny that they're here for a reason also. And that one of the things one of my mentors said to me a couple weeks ago, which I'm still thinking about it, obviously, is, you know, you're helping them fulfill their destiny, right? That squash or that corn was given to us to provide nourishment in a way that nothing else can. And when you share a meal with that, then you are helping that plant be everything that it was meant to be for centuries and everything that it has been. And when you grow it, you're making sure that you're providing space for that, for the ones that come behind us, you know, for the next generations. And if those intentions and thoughts weren't made over these centuries that have continued to let us have these beautiful ingredients, we wouldn't be enjoying them in their unique nourishment in this moment. So how can we make sure that you know, my grandchildren will one day be able to say, like, I remember grandma talking to me about this corn, or I remember being in the garden with my auntie, you know, when I was really young and she was talking about the bean and how this bean came to us. It's sharing those things that make food this beautiful vessel that can transcend time and space and moments. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And so when people are like, food is medicine, I'm like, you don't even understand what you're saying and what it really truly means to us as Indigenous people and being here in this moment. So I wanted to share that with everyone, because for me personally, especially when it comes to, you know, poor eating choices maybe along the way that got me to a point where I had to really stop and think about how I ate from this day forward. But since I've done that, it's not mindless consumption. Everybody has to go through drive-throughs once in a while. You know, I'm on the road a lot, and when I pack my food, I feel a lot better, but I don't always have time or resource to do that. But I don't beat myself up about the fewer times that I have to drive through somewhere or eat at a gas station or something. It makes me appreciate meals like this that much more. Like, I do have time to make this meal and to be present in this moment and to enjoy it. And yes, those other times exist, but today I'm going to make the most of this, and it is going to be nourishing, and I'm going to appreciate it. And it's not going to make me sleepy, and it's not going to make me, you know, unproductive for the rest of the day. It's going to give me fuel, and it's going to give me energy, and it's going to, you know, make me happy that I thought of Jack and of everybody that I shared this meal with today, and how it can define the rest of your space from that day. So let me take a look at this, because I think it is, I'm just gonna have to check this potato quick.
We had a question if you have any favorite Indigenous cookbooks.
Yeah, there are a few that I love. I mean, Sean Sherman is a good friend of mine. I actually was at the Indigenous Food Lab last week, working on some beaver that were donated there, and teaching some of the crew there how to properly butcher them. There's a lot of really good recipes that aren't very intimidating in the Indigenous cookbook that Sean put out. If you have a little bit more skills, it's a little bit more of a technical book, but there's a chef, Shane Chartrand from Canada, and he has a book called To Wow. And there are some incredible ways to treat food in his book. I know that I saw, it was a marinated stained glass salmon. And I was thinking, if I had fresh salmon, or I had access to do that, or felt confident enough to do that, I totally would. So it just depends on the different levels that you have. I've often found that there's some incredible recipes in community cookbooks that are put together with like traditional recipes, and they don't have to contain flour or sugar or extra stuff. It's just a lot of the pure traditional recipe. And like I said, a lot of it is experimenting and to see where you like things. Me personally, this summer squash having just a slightly golden bit and slightly soft, but still a little bit to the tooth, so I can taste, like I can feel the bite, the crunch in the bite. That's where I like it. But I know that if my sister were here, she would make me roast this pan of vegetables for another, I don't know, hour until everything was really soggy. That's the way she likes her meals. So it just depends on, a lot of that is personal preference, and looking at a recipe as a guide or an outline, and then saying that it's okay to change things up based on what you prefer, how you like it, and then just seeing how things work. Like I said, it's a little bit better when you take the intimidation part out of it, and you just think of what you like the most, and adjusting things to fit what you're going to appreciate or you're going to enjoy eating. So I'll just get this assembled here. And all I have to do is add my vegetables. And this is, again, is completely up to you on how much you'd like to add. And how much of a bite of rice you'd like with each one of these. So that's a good amount. I'll add a little bit of the raw onions. And I saved a little bit of my dried cranberries because I really like the chew that they give to the dish. It's just another one of those textures, so it's not all the same bite. And I'm going to add the rest of what I have for my dressing, but I'm not too sure if you can see it or not. It is pretty dressed, and I still have quite a bit left. So that wild rice just really sucked in that flavor, and it gave it a nice little sheen, but it's not overwhelming, and it's not soaking the rice or weighing it down. It's just giving it a nice little compliment. So I'll add those cranberry, the rest of that dressing. A little bit of these crunchy pepitas on top. And the last thing I'm going to add are the beets, because I mean, you could see the cutting board, or anybody that's ever touched a beet. Knows that they will make everything you touch turn red. But that's like this beauty about them, right? You can see that some of them have caramelized a little bit on the outside, and that's just their natural sugar. I'm just going to kind of sparingly add this, because the more that you stir that around from this point, the more red or purple everything is going to get. So you definitely don't have to add beets, but if you get a chance to try them, or if you like them, this is a really good way to treat them. By roasting them, just wiping off that skin, dicing them, and then throwing them in the oven for another couple minutes. And they end up being, I'm actually going to try one. I don't know if how everybody feels about a beet, but they're almost like this. They start off being sweet, and then it turns into earthiness, and it's slightly chewy, but it's still a little soft. I mean, they're incredible. And once you start eating them, I feel like you just want to eat them more, because it's really hard you can't duplicate that flavor or that texture. We even, I'm trying to see if I have some here. I don't, but in the fall, we slice our beets and marinate them in a little bit of maple vinegar and maple sugar, and then dehydrate them in the sun, and they turn into this like fruit roll-up-y, jerky, sweet and earthy goodness. Like, my kids put them in a bag and take them to school for their snacks, and everybody's like, "What are you eating?" And it's just like sliced beets, right? But they're so plentiful, and there's so much incredible nutrition in a beet that I always like to say, if you haven't tried it, try doing it in a way like this that's not intimidating, and just seeing if you like it. They're very economical to purchase, and they're so good for you. So definitely try that. But yes, here we go. Ended up with our salad. I put on the bottom of the recipe that I shared that you can really substitute out anything. If you wanted to add some carrot or a different kind of vegetable to this, like, do it, whatever you'd like. And this is warm still. I did give the rice a quick rinse, but not enough to make it a cold rice. And then all of the warm vegetables that I put in there just help absorb and marry all those flavors together. The last thing I'm going to do, because so far the only salt we've added was a little pinch when we first roasted the vegetables, and then a little pinch in our salad dressing. So just to kind of bring it out, I'm going to add that last pinch, and it all ends up being around a half a teaspoon total of salt. So you really want it to work as something that just enhances the flavor and doesn't cover everything up or take over, because you want to be able to taste all the incredible flavors that every ingredient you put in here will bring to the table. So you can kind of see where that beet is already starting to turn it a little bit red. So the more beet that's in there, the more colorful it'll get. But there are times when we just do beets and wild rice, and it's like this purple, delicious salad, and we'll let it sit in the refrigerator overnight, and then, you know, kind of give it a nice swirl, and it has this beautiful color and this indescribable flavor. So definitely be adventurous about what you try, and don't be intimidated, and know that, you know, everybody sometimes makes something that's not successful, myself included, but you learn a little bit more, and you learn a little bit more about the ingredients and about what you prefer when you eat, or excuse me, when you preserve your food. So be a little adventurous and try things, and know that small changes make big gains in the end. And I think for any of us, hearing that you have to adjust everything about the way you eat, or you have to take this out or that out, you know, for me personally, moderation has been the key, and being able to really enhance and appreciate the flavors, even if they're not always my favorite flavors. It's being able to be exposed to them and saying, I'm willing to try this, and I'm willing to taste this. And although it might not be my favorite, I know that I'm going to feel better. And the more I have it, the more I'm going to want it. And that's, I think, how you can end up making, for me, that's how I ended up making changes that really affected my health in the end, and really thinking about food as being something that nourishes me, and it nourishes more than just my body. And when you have food that nourishes your spirit, your body naturally feels better. So that's that. I don't know if there's any other questions or not.
Thank you so much. No, that was wonderful. I really appreciate your take on, you know, the food and how it's enriched your life. You know, I think that's important to hear, you know, your motivation, you know, what drives you. So I really appreciate that story, you know, you're sharing. I don't know that we have any more questions in the chat. It looks like we're pretty good. I just wish I was there to eat.
I wish you were too. I wish everybody was here to eat with me. I would love to share this meal, but for the meantime, we have to kind of interact this way. One day we'll all be able to get together and really be nourished by each other. And it's wonderful. Thank you for inviting me to spend a little bit of time and a recipe with everyone today.
Yeah, Kateri said thank you. Jen, it looks like Jen said thank you. And they all appreciate your knowledge. So thank you so much.
Well, eat well and be well, and know that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There's a lot of resources in our communities to help support, or I know that there's a lot of connections that can help with even sourcing some really good, delicious ingredients. So definitely, if it's something that you're thinking about or you want to do more of, reach out, because there's people that can support you, myself included.
Yes. Wonderful.
And just one last housekeeping thing. We did record today's webinar. And so we will be sharing it via our Facebook, and also you can find it on our webpage. So if there's some things that you feel like you missed, or you need to help you out in the kitchen, you can refer to there. So thank you so much, Elena. It was such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And so have a wonderful day, everyone, and hopefully we'll see each other down the road.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.